going to call our regular Board of Education meeting to order. And this evening, we have the pleasure of having the officers of the Lee Elementary Student Council here with us tonight. So if they would like to come up, ladies. Okay, we have with us this evening Casey DeKaiser, who is the Vice President, Faith Thompson, who is the Secretary, Kate Telto, who is the Treasurer, and we also have Mr. Manguni, our elementary principal, who is here to do the pledge with the ladies this evening. So we thank them very much for coming, and at this time, if I could ask everyone to please rise. When you're ready, we're ready.
Ready.
Okay.
I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good job. Thank you, ladies, and Mr. Manguni. Did a great job. Okay, before we get started, I just wanted to take a moment to, since our last meeting, we lost a longtime retired teacher, Kathy Bolo, and the Firstenow family. Mrs. Firstenow was a longtime teacher too, lost her husband Gordon. So if we could just take a moment to remember the Bolo and Firstenow families, that would be wonderful. Thank you. Next, our mission statement. Bridget?
At Richmond Community Schools, we provide a quality education that empowers students to be successful in the global community. Tracy? Here. Jeff?
Here.
Dan?
Here.
Chris? Here. Sarah? Here. Margaret?
Here.
I'm here. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Next is approval of our agenda. Item number 11, the closed session, will be removed. So number 12, adjournment, will become 11. So I would need a motion to approve the amendment as the agenda as amended.
So moved.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next is our consent agenda. Brian?
In your packet, there's a hire and a resignation. Mr. Lutz is our new physical education teacher. He is supposed to be here. I know he was scheduled, and I just want to make sure nothing happened to him, so we'll follow up on that one, but he may come a little later for that. And then the resignation from our purchasing accounts payable coordinator.
Okay. A motion would be in order to approve the consent agenda items.
So moved.
Oh, I didn't hear him, sorry.
Oh, no, sorry.
And Bridget supported that. It's been moved and supported. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next, our superintendent and legislative update.
It's been pretty quiet up in Lansing. The legislators have been on vacation for the Thanksgiving holiday. However, there's been some movement at the national level. The Elementary and Secondary Education Act is expected to be voted on the first week of December. This is an act that is probably 10 years past its expiration. It's often referred to as No Child Left Behind. It was first put in place in 2001, the last revision. But some of the things that I think are good for schools in this package that's in front of us is it requires states to, it continues the requirement for the 3 through 8 and one-time testing at the high school level, but it significantly reduces what state involvement is in with the terms of the bottom 5% in those schools that are having less than 2/3 of the kids graduating. So in the state of Michigan, our Michigan Department of Education has gotten involved for focus in priority schools, and the priority schools are the bottom 5%. This new law requires them to just kind of stay in there, if you will, helping those bottom 5% schools, which we are not one of those. It also talks about currently, if you do not test 95% of your students, you're automatically deemed as in essence, a failing school because you didn't test 95%. The new ESCA legislation requires that you're not penalized for not testing 95. It has to be taken into consideration from a low participation in whatever state's accountability. So you could do very well on the test, but if you didn't test 95, one student can make a difference. You were automatically deemed as, in essence, not successful. So that's a positive for districts and so forth. There is language about increasing early childhood investment, which has been also part of our state governor and legislators' promotion. It does move the oversight of those programs from the Michigan Department of, the Department of Education at the national level to the Department of Human Services. But there is, what that looks like is still not certain, but there is new funding scheduled for early childhood programs. And finally, the last part on that one is there's no change in the Title I formula. It's still based on the your free and reduced lunch rates from the previous, but it does change the portion of allocations where schools that have a higher percentage of poverty, more of the allocation goes to them in the big picture. That's pretty much the only change from there. From a state level, the roads bill, as you know, passed and it was signed into law. There's some concerns regarding the impact that would have on school aid fund, but the next big agenda from the state legislators, which we expect them to take up right after the Thanksgiving holiday, is the Detroit Public School and what the dilemma that the state has in terms of that financial mess, I don't know how else to say it, that several years of an emergency financial manner has allowed that district and to continue to grow. So one of the plans is to take from the school aid fund approximately $50 for every child and move that money to pay off the Detroit Public Schools debt over the next roughly 10 years. So for all schools across the state, that money is in essence not earmarked to anybody. It should be coming to schools from the school aid, but it's not. So they're looking at using those funds to help pay that debt. So that's the one we're watching to see if there's going to be any direct impact on our funding from a school's perspective. If you remember, several years ago we experienced a mid-year cut, a very drastic one. Though we don't anticipate that, but that's always on the radar that it could happen in the middle of the school year. I wanted to talk about two items that came up in the previous board meeting conversation. One is regarding the student laptops, and I just want to try to talk in broad aspect about our filtering system. I sent to the board a summary kind of what our system was, the filtering system, but for the listening audience out there. In essence, every website out there, and I'm going to be as simple as possible because anything with technology really isn't as simple, is put into one of many categories. And depending on the category is what our filtering system will block. So for instance, you could have websites that are categorized as games that are completely appropriate for education, but you can also have websites that are not appropriate for education in that game category. And so if on our filtering system we allow games to go through, there could be a website that goes through our filtering system that allows students or staff access to certain websites that may not be educationally sound. So there was an incident where it was a website was accessed based on the category of news media in the category which is allowed. So since then we have in essence restricted more categories to try to get a handle on it. As you know, there are millions and millions of websites out there, and to log each one is virtually impossible. So that's why we go by the categories. So one of the things that I've asked the community for on both the positive as well as things that may have come through our filter is if you see things that are out there, we want to know about it. If you know of websites that are good for students, that are educationally, we created a form which we've gotten, we have the ability that once that form's filled out, we can review the website and either open it or restrict that specific website. So I would really calling on the community to work with us as we enter this technology age and putting laptops in students' hands pretty much 24/7 to make sure that we're protecting our students to the best. So I sent out a letter to the elementary students and did a phone call to the secondary students or families to see if they to direct them to the website, and I will keep you updated on that progress. I think I sent you a copy of the letter in the newsletter. The second part was there was a discussion regarding technology training, what we've done to date and so far. And as I said to you many times, it's really trying to customize it to where our staff are at. But just to name you a few, these are some of the trainings that have happened this year so far with our staff members. The use of EduCanon website, which is a program that allows teachers to put questions onto YouTube or TeacherTube as an instructional practice. The use of Plickers and the website Kahoot. In fact, I was actually in a classroom today that was utilizing it with Mr. Bartels as we were doing our walkthrough. That does poses questions to students that allows the teacher to get immediate responses by the students answering from their laptop. All of the buildings have done training with OneDrive, which is the where they're saving their files, the Office 365. There's been training dealing with websites such as mel.org, teacher helpers for resources for teachers. There's been training provided with several teachers from the middle school on just troubleshooting with laptops. If you've got students in your classroom and you've got 30 laptops open and something goes wrong, what are some basic troubleshooting to start with to make sure that it's functional and operational? Using laptops to blog. In fact, I referenced one of the high school teachers last time was using it as a blogging exercise for students. Many of our staff have gone through the classroom instruction that work with technology as a focus. And that conversation is continuing now that we actually have the devices in the classroom. We've used training on how to use the laptops and incorporate with the Khan Academy, which is the SAT prep for our high school students. Training on using just Windows 8, which is a different platform or look than what our staff and students were used to previously. Developing e-lessons that they can share between departments and staff members. Those are just a few. Some of the other staff members or training that we have been unique to a specific grade level or a course. For instance, the IT staff have shown teachers how to utilize the smart tables that's similar to a smart board that they have in the class, but in the table. Is it finished? No. We now need to take it to that next level in terms of, okay, now how do you integrate it and seamlessly have that be part of the classroom? So there's been a variety just this year alone based on staff meetings, based on professional developments, delayed start, or early release Wednesdays, the before school, we've had the PD days with training our staff. This is definitely an ongoing process as staff become aware of new features. We want to make sure that they're comfortable with them and using them in the classroom. I could say I had the pleasure today. We did, as I said earlier, we did a walkthrough at the middle school, and there were multiple teachers utilizing the technology, whether they were with students partnering, and it was an activity where it's demonstrated their knowledge, or whether they were doing individual typing. We are farther today than we were the third week of school. And in 6 weeks, we're going to be farther along from that. You have my commitment. I know I'll speak for Mr. Berkmeyer that we're going to keep addressing staff needs, and it's going to evolve. They're going to come up with, well, I want to try this. How do I do that? We're going to provide that support for them. Okay.
So, can we ask a question? So then, is it safe to assume then if the training that's been going on in each building, if there are people that are struggling, we're working with those people, and it's a work in process, and we know if if there are? Because not everybody's going to catch on like
You're
everybody else.
absolutely
You know,
right.
everybody
And-
catches on at different.
And that's part of why this year I have structured kind of my walkthroughs with the building principals, because we've had that conversation. And I'll speak to when Ms. Michon and I walked through. There was a classroom that wasn't using the technology, that we had a conversation that this activity could easily be used using technology, doing that same activity. And the conversation now leads the principal to have with that staff member. And if that staff member is uncomfortable, then we're going to either have Eric or Brandon or Harold, one of the IT, or Anthony's there, or the three principals, or other staff in the building to work with that staff member to get them at a comfort level. My expectation is that there's technology being integrated in all classrooms. We are going to have, as we begin this process, there's going to be a little variance until we get that comfort level of staff member who have not used technology as we're expecting them at this point. But I would say for certain, give us 6 months, beginning of second semester, 6 months, 6 weeks, beginning of second semester, we're going to be at a very different point because the expectations are growing and staff are talking to each other of how they use staff or use the technology. And again, it's going to vary on that staff member's comfort level, but that's not an excuse. It's not an excuse not to use it. We're going to address it with that staff member.
And then the sites that you were talking about, all the different things, so then everybody has the ability to get to those on all
Well,
those different things you were referring to.
What we did when we had the issue with the laptop and that site, trying to figure out what caused that problem. When we imaged the laptops and we gave staff the laptops that they have the same image that students have. And the concept or the thought behind that was, if I'm planning to use Kahoot, is one of the websites. If I'm using my laptop and it says it's blocked on my laptop, it notifies that teacher that we've got to either open it for that teacher so that she or he can use it with their students, to see whether that's, because what I don't want is a teacher to plan their lesson around using this website, and they get in the class and are ready to teach 30 or 25 kids that are sitting in front of them, and all theirs are blocked but the teacher. So part of the planning is to make sure it runs, if it's open on yours, it's open on the student's one. And that's readily accessible, that we can open those websites. And that was the conversation that Mr. Berkmeyer had with the Teachers Union president earlier last week. Was we want to make sure that if the teachers know before they begin teaching what websites are accessible, because it could be a website that's perfectly acceptable educationally, but it's classified in one of those categories that is currently blocked. We can open just that website up and they and their students can use it. So if there is a website that's blocked, we encourage staff to also use that same form so we can get that website open, assuming it's got educational purposes.
Then one last one. You talked about student issues. So I know, correct me, OneDrive at the high school that they're storing their stuff on. So you had said something to me when I asked a week ago about finding out if students were having issues, how that was working for them. Where's that at?
We had the IT team, if you remember, Harold from the middle school and Brandon from the elementary and Eric at the high school, literally went classroom by classroom. I'm looking for, that's been completed, correct?
Last week, they went around to every teacher to ask if they had any specific questions that hasn't been covered in training. And then this morning, they started at the high school and went into every classroom just to ask the students, is there anything that you're experiencing, that you're having troubles, that your teacher wasn't able to troubleshoot, that we can do today? They did that at the high school and the middle school today.
Okay.
So it's more of just a follow-up, because if there's a question out there that one student's dealing with, it could be a bigger issue that we need to address organizationally, but it could be just something very simplistic that the student might be doing incorrectly that we can fix and correct.
Okay. Thank you.
The last thing I have to report, and I just received news today, is I want to congratulate Lee Elementary School, Mrs. Durs, Mr. Berkmeyer. We received a STEM grant for $2,700 for the Lego Club at Lee. You literally just got it today that we're signing the paperwork and having this come back. There's a L&L Educational Foundation is primarily out of the Romeo area, and they've now expanded. So when this opportunity came, we jumped on it to get every dollar we can. So this money will go towards a list of supplies to for the Lego Club at Lee. And I do want to thank Mr. Berkmeyer for kind of leading this in terms of writing it. Mrs. Durst for, I mean, it's a lot of stuff we're getting. And so just taking the time to put it together, it's a good thing for the district. So.
It's very exciting. Very exciting.
Brian, is there talk about, just on back on the technology kind of topic? I mean, I think that the whole idea of making your way safely through that territory with children has to be absolutely daunting. As a parent, I can only imagine what that's like, you know? And so, because it's ever changing, and I certainly know that the students that I work with know so much more about it than what I know, you know? Right. So what are the aspects, I mean, now that we have this kind of technology and kids are taking it home, and maybe that's a new thing for families, for them to have that kind of technology at home. I mean, are we looking at or thinking about what are some trainings we can do for parents to help them make their way through what it's like to have children with this kind of technology in their lives? I mean,
it's kind of ironic you bring this up because Mrs. Mashana just had it probably about a week ago. She actually had a parent come in and say, could we offer some classes for parents just in understanding whether it's the basic of the laptop and how I can access my students' information and just understanding it. So I'm gonna formulate what that's gonna look like and get that out. It will probably be right after the first of the year with the holiday coming up, and oftentimes people's schedules are hectic, but to get that out, because it's a great outreach for parents to bring down some anxiety they may have, especially if technology isn't as prevalent in their home as some households have it. It is very new.
yeah.
So-
And how to keep, I mean, everyone wants to keep their child safe,
Oh, absolutely,
you know? And so how do
absolutely.
you do that? How do you check? How do you all those kinds of things.
And that was some of the things when we rolled out the elementary, that we really want to make sure parents had access. Here's your child's email, here's your child's login, that you have access to get into that. And along with that, I guess as a positive note, one of the things that we put on the laptops was that human and computer monitoring. We've had incidents of 3 situations where we got a flag that we need to look into something, and it was nothing serious, but the system worked in terms of it coming in, we forwarded it on to the appropriate people at the building. In this case, it was at the high school and the middle school that had to address it, and we were able to find out and solve the solution, and without having, but it was a flag that something could be going wrong. So that aspect, I know on a lot of parents' minds was, at least at the elementary, I remember that being very vivid in the conversation among elementary parents. What does that look like? Who's monitoring my child, type of thing? And it actually has worked out very favorably for us. So, but no, we are planning, because I want to thank Ms. Michon for bringing that to our that idea.
As for the website content filter, I actually received a phone call last Friday and then immediately tested the website and then used it. It's right here on the homepage.
The form.
So you can just click on that.
Yeah.
And I really, Eric and I were talking when the first incident happened, and I almost said, I want to bring in some pizza and some pop and have parents test their system and really help us out in finding those, because there are hundreds, millions, billions of websites out there that if we can help work it together collaboratively, we can block specific websites as we know about them. And that's really what I'm hoping for. And we streamline the process so that when we get that, we can act on it as quickly as possible.
Well, it's such a moving target.
It is.
Because it's constantly changing. Right, so that's that's so much of the problem with it too. But yeah.
Okay, thank you. I was going to ask, but I thought maybe we'll go back. Looks like our new phys ed teacher is here, so we're going to go back a minute and introduce him.
It is my pleasure to introduce Mr.
You have to
Jeffrey
stand up.
Lutz.
Yeah, sorry. So everyone can see you.
You want to come up and say a few words? Mr. Lutz comes with us. He's just exited from the service.
Yes.
And you can stay right at the podium there.
Oh, over here, thank you. Hi, all. Yes, yes. First of all, sorry for my tardiness. Again, my name's Jeff Lutz. I come by way of Battle Creek. Grew up there. Family's from there. Dad was a Kellogg's guy. So thrilled. This is my first teaching position. Went back to school later in life to get the teaching certification. So it means extra to me to be in the position that you've given me. So,
That's good. Everything.
great.
His excitement when you see the kids in the class, I've had an opportunity to see it just on a couple of occasions as I walk into the building. The kids' excitement and his interaction with the kids is exactly what Lee Elementary is. His personality adds to the building, and so I'm excited to have him part of the team.
Thank you for that.
What he brings to the school.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Is someone who you'd like to introduce?
Yes, absolutely. My wife Katrina Lutz is here as well. She seems to know some people here, which is fantastic.
Sean was my high school principal.
So yeah, thrilled to be here. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you. We are thrilled to have you join.
Thank you. Thank
Love it there.
Yes, I'm already lost.
Good deal.
Well, it's very tall, so I envision the kids wanting to climb you. I've already touched the ceiling for my request.
By request. Please show us you can do it. Oh, excellent. Okay, next, items of interest from members of the board. Anyone?
Actually, I had the pleasure of participating or being at the middle school for the Veterans Day celebration. And I just want to say thanks, Mr. Bartels. That was a great thing you guys put on. And being a veteran myself, it was moving. My daughter called me at 6:30 in the morning while I was at work and said, "Are you going to be here? I want you here." So I left work at 1 o'clock to be there.
It always is a tremendous job that they do there, yes, always. Anyone else?
Yeah, I had a few things. I don't know if it's like a trend or a fad, what's going on with the ugly sweater stuff. You know, a lot of people are doing that kind of thing. I'd like to see maybe a December 14th meeting if the board wore their ugly sweaters to the meeting. I think that'd be a fun, different idea.
You said the board, right?
I'm going with no.
Well, I'm gonna wear mine December 14th, so I'm welcoming anybody else that wants to do it.
Prize, like, do we get a prize?
Yeah, an attaboy, I guess, you know. The other thing was,
Yes, move to the next thing, please, yes.
Move on.
think there's some
Thank you to Mrs. Durst. It's nice to see her here tonight. I know she puts in a lot of extra hours over there at the Lee School. Many times I drive through campus and I see her car there late nights working. And last but not least, happy birthday to Tracy.
Yes, happy birthday, Tracy.
Thank you. Aren't you all gonna sing?
Well, somebody, Mr. Manguni, I thought, and Anthony, I think the two of them were going to sing.
He got you a candy bar.
So he doesn't have to sing happy birthday. Excellent, excellent.
Really not kidding about the ugly sweater though.
Okay.
I think you made that point, Dan, thank you. Yes, we all got that. He's the only one that's gonna do it, that's right. Now that would be fun. Anybody else? All right, next is public comments. This is the portion of our meeting. If there's anyone in the audience who would like to address the board, you can do so. We ask you to come up to the podium. You have 3 minutes. There is a card there. You can leave your name and telephone number. If you need a question answered, someone will do so within 24 hours. Is there anyone who would like to speak? Okay, we're moving on to action items. We are doing our second reading of our board policies. from 2 weeks ago?
Yes. There's a couple that I just want to bring to some
Okay.
attention, some clarification that was asked.
Okay.
On the first policy, I received a question regarding letter B and at the end of it. The and is, the third part is letter C. So it's not going to continue after the and, it goes to letter C. It's just the way it was phrased in the formatting or matting. In this policy 6146, I don't think I have any changes or corrections there. In policy 6000 or 6320 under purchasing, there was a clarification on page 3 of your document. It talked about 72 hours, it talked about 5 days. We listed calendar days to define it. And talking with the attorney from Trinidad, felt that was a sufficient amount of time in their eyes by defining as calendar days. So the document you have, I think it's highlighted in yellow and blue on that one. There is a spelling error which I cannot find on statutes, but I will find it before we send it on. In the school safety, 8400. There was nothing changed in there. I think it's important just to note that in Lansing there's been a lot of conversation about concealed weapons and the Open Carry Act and allowing schools, or allowing them in schools. And the governor's position is to leave it up to the local school district, and he has vowed to veto any bill that allows open or concealed weapons in schools. So the policies we've recently approved allow us to dictate on what we believe, and our policies do not allow weapons in schools. So that's what this school safety was, the last policy that aligned with all those other ones, the 3217, 4217, and 5772 policy. Basically, there's no weapons on school property unless they're a police officer or they're a stage prop and a non-working weapon, etc. The next policy, which is food service, which is 8500. This one, there was no changes from our last board meeting. Just want to point out it then puts in alignment with following the USDA guidelines as a requirement. 9210, there was some questions regarding the language that requires support organizations to have an insurance policy, and I think it's on, let me start off on page 2, letter H.
And it's 9211.
9211, I apologize, 9211. On page 2, letter H, the board permits was listed as twice, so I struck out that on the one that I updated on the website today, because that was brought to my attention as well. I gave you a hard copy, Margaret, for yours. But the second part, which talked about the insurance carrier, which would be, I guess it'd be page 1A, that requires support organizations shall indemnify and hold the board harmless from any and all claims that arise. In talking with SETSEG today, which is our district insurance company, if they are their own 501c3 organization, they cannot fall under our insurance. We can't offer them insurance. If they are not their own 501c3, then their finances, as long as they're a school associated with the school, then the finances should be running through our student activities account, and they would automatically fall under our SETSEG policy. We don't have to have a separate policy. But if they're their own 501c3, we can't offer them to be as a rider on ours. They have to pick up their own. And it was estimated anywhere from, he was estimating based on his experience that it would be $200 to $400 a year for an insurance policy for this amount. And he used an example of a school district that a booster club who was not their own that was their own 501c3 organization, but did not have an insurance policy. They were hosting a festival where the board members were driving around individuals, in this case it was in a golf cart, and the golf cart tipped and severely damaged or hurt the person in that golf cart. That family not only went after the district, but they also went after their own 501c3 organization, and because they didn't have an insurance policy, those board members were held personally liable for any damage because it was their event. Now, our part of it is going to be looking at our policy. When they rent the facility, they should be having that policy. So if this is and I'm just going to use the athletic boosters as an example. I know they have their own tax ID number. If they're using our facilities, they're supposed to have a insurance policy that covers them. So when we held the health fair that was here in September, we partnered with the chamber. The chamber had their own insurance policy that covered anybody because it was a joint venture. And so that's what this policy is saying, that is if you're your own 501c3 organization, you need to have an insurance policy to operate, and that's what the policy is. And one of the questions that was asked of me was, have the clubs been notified? It hasn't, because it's not a policy. My expectation is if this is approved, my next step would be to send them a letter notifying of the chain. SETSEG is going to send me a list of contacts that they have worked with that 501c3 organizations can purchase their own insurance through, just as a reference for them as a starting point, to provide that to them.
And
would we all, next, we might be answering this next, but I'll wait.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Will we be also offering those who might already have their 501c3 to then run their stuff through our?
That's going to be the next step that I'm going to have to, as an organization, see which one of our groups has their own 501c3 license, tax ID, to make sure we have that all accounted for, and which ones don't. And if they're using our tax ID, they're still part of our group, then their funds should be funneled through the district, because we should be overseeing those funds to make sure they're spent appropriately. And that I don't have at this moment, which groups are, but that would be my next step to look into. Basically, the three principles were that kind of guarantee that they fall under our insurance policy is they're not a 501c3 organization, their financial records run through our district's student activities account, and that there is some oversight either by the district or school administrator, someone in the school district that guides in the decisions of making sure that it follows the school philosophy. So I think that was I think I got all the questions from last time. So the SETSEG is really pushing and encouraging districts to adopt the policy to not only protect themselves, but also for the members to realize that if you do not have an insurance policy, you could be personally liable for something happens during an event. And I'll just use an example. We had the Halloween with the PTO at Lee. I'm trying to think of the name of it.
Monster Dash.
Monster Dash. If something were to happen, parents' first instinct is to, they're going to go after the school district if they're going to sue for some negligence or something like that. But also because it was organized, and I'm going to make some assumptions that it's a completely PTO sponsored, those board members could be liable if something happens, if someone was going to sue the district or sue that group that put on the event. So I think it's going to be an education for a lot of our groups. And I'm envisioning meeting with them in some fashion, whether it's at their regular meeting or going to one of their evening groups. We have a lot of groups out there, like the RBI Club, the wrestling group, and as long as they have their own 501c and their own insurance, there's no issue here, and that's going to be the education.
Okay,
So
thank you.
I think I got all the questions on that one.
Okay, are we good with any questions? We have a motion
Make the motion to approve policy 6111, 6146, 6320, 8400, 8500, 9211 for the second reading.
Support.
Dan supported. It's been moved and supported. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, aye.
I have a
Sorry.
question, sorry. Brian, on 8400 school safety, it says the board prohibited weapons on school property at school-sponsored events except for very limited circumstances. Obviously, those circumstances are all put in those policies, 3217, 4217, and 5772.
Correct, yes, they are. It lists in those policies, there's a bulleted list that shows what those are.
Right, because I believe under state law, I'm not a lawyer or whatnot, but I believe that like someone that has their CPL can open carry on school property legally.
Correct, and we do have our attorney from Collins and Blah has given us his position. There was an issue with the Ann Arbor Public Schools, and there was a case where actually the school district won on that issue. Some of the concerns, or some of the things that they had going for them was their city ordinances and everything lined up to match the district's ordinance. Where our attorney feels that someone could challenge us on this would be as if the city ordinances do not align up, and so we're in conflict. But there has been a recent case with the Ann Arbor Public Schools that was upheld in prohibiting concealed weapons in the school.
Not concealed.
Not concealed.
I'm sorry.
Open carry.
Open carry.
If you have a CPL.
Right.
And that's gonna be, the way the current law reads, that could be challenged.
So do we specifically state that in any of these policies?
That they're allowed to.
They're not allowed to.
All the policies say that you're not allowed to have any type of guns on campus, unless it's for theatrical. There's a law enforcement officer, and the third one, I'm trying to find it right now on my notes here. But all of them are, we do not allow staff members, we do not allow students, parents, weapons on campus.
You said starter gun for like a track.
Starter gun,
Is that
thank
what it
you,
was?
starter guns, that was the other one.
I saw you doing this, and I thought that's
Starter
what you meant.
guns. So those other policies they all prohibit it.
So do we know what our city ordinance is, if it matches up with us or not?
Off the top of my head, I don't. I can find that out.
Just a quick question too, just a picky thing. I'm looking at this list of policy 3217, 4217. Isn't it typically that follows 5217, that would be the next one? Or no, it says 5772.
In this one, it is 5-7.
It is different, it's not the same?
3-2 is for professional staff, 4-2 is for support staff, and the 5-7 is the student. It is 5-7.
Okay, all right, just sometimes follows the plan.
Okay.
Just on that last 9 through 11. When you do the research and find out which groups are the 5013Cs, can we get a copy of that?
Oh,
Just so
absolutely.
we know, okay. I'm
Absolutely.
curious
I
to
will.
kind of see where they fall.
What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start with the building administrators. I start identifying what are all the groups, because we have choir boosters, band boosters, PTOs, and start identifying which ones we have in our schools that are associated with us. And then from there, identify who has their own 501c3, who doesn't. So I would definitely get that to you.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, it has been moved and supported. All those in favor, aye. Aye, opposed? Motion carries. Okay, that concludes our business. We just want to, on behalf of the board, wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving, a safe holiday, those that work within our school district, a nice long rest for a good amount of days. And we are adjourned at 7:45.